It is going to be a little bit of a history lesson, so if you can bear with me. This is my 14th year of teaching. Like every day I wake up and I'm so excited. I feel so honored. By the way, if I cry during this, that's totally normal. So I want to be the best. So I wake up every morning, I'm excited and feel honored to be able to work in the North Lawndale community. I really do believe that every kid in Chicago deserves a high-quality education without regard to their zip code, their income, or their race. I wake up every day personally because I am struck by the fact, the visceral fact, that all has not always been all in our city, and particularly the community of North Lawndale where I teach. My motivation to keep my classroom rigorous and to challenge all learners comes from the fact that I'm a student of history. Even the history of the neighborhood where I teach. I try to keep that at the forefront of my mind, and even my students' minds, how close and how near the extreme policies of exclusion are to the neighborhood where they live and where they take classes. And how those policies of exclusion and racism have actually led to the decline of the neighborhood and the struggles of the neighborhood. I wake up motivated every single day, excited to push all my learners forward, because I'm aware of the fact that from the early 1900s all the way into the 1970s, African Americans were effectively cut off from 50% of Chicago. They literally could not live there due to either racially restricted covenants or simple de facto segregation. This was supported by government policy, the elite of Chicago, greedy real estate brokers, and the complacency of the common man. Because African Americans were forced to overcrowd the neighborhoods where they were allowed to live, and to add insult to injury, because they were unable to have access to loans backed by the FHA, they were forced to buy homes on contract. The payments were ridiculously high. And I'm talking about middle-class African-American families in the 40s and 50s and 60s were trying to do the right thing, that had bought into the American dream, wanted to build personal wealth, wanted to own a home, were not able to do that. Now, because of this overcrowding and the unfair lending practices of contract selling, wealth was stolen from the North Lawndale neighborhood. So when we look at the problems of North Lawndale, I can look at my kids in the eyes and say, look, this is why this is the way it is. The school where I teach, in particular, the school building where I teach, at one point in the 1950s was on double shift, which meant that half of the kids that were going to that school would go in the morning, and the other half would go in the afternoon. Something like 98% of all black schools in the 50s were like this. There might have been one or two white schools in Chicago that were like that in the 50s or 60s. So that means generations of educational opportunity lost, which means my kids that I teach today, their grandparents lost wealth because of this system, which couldn't be passed down to their children. So this situation that our society created for African Americans meant that obviously the kids in black communities in Chicago had way less time learning. It also meant they would go for large parts of the day unsupervised. And it's not a surprise, if you know anything about the history of gangs in Chicago, that the 60s is when many of the gangs that still exist today sprung up. These kids in the 50s and 60s and 70s, they were not part of the all, right? They were excluded from that. I have a picture, I wish I should have emailed it, and it's from the Tribune from 1961 when my school building went from a double shift school, and they actually finally, because of enough parents and enough teachers stood up angrily and demanded more space for their children to learn, they finally actually started opening more school buildings in the city. So I have this picture of kids marching down the street out of my school building into one of their new schools. And I keep that picture in my mind, and I show the picture to my kids to remind them that whatever
the solution is to the problems of the neighborhood, that education is part of that solution in some way. Don't get me wrong, I'm not just talking about all the bad things with my kids. I want them to know both the beauty and the struggles of North Lawndale. But above all, I want them to know when they look around and they see all the abandoned buildings, when they see the drug dealing taking place on the corner, if they witness violence, I want them to know that there's hope. And there's hope because this wasn't an accident. The neighborhood of North Lawndale just didn't magically turn into a ghetto. If that word is offensive, I'm sorry, but I used it. It was purposely made that way. And that's cool, in a sense, because if it was done on purpose, then it can be undone on purpose, right? So truly in this situation, knowledge is power. We can look at a situation that looks hopeless and we don't know why it is the way it is, and we see societal forces that made it that way. So I feel like my job as a teacher is to show my kids these patterns in history, right? This happened then, this is happening now. Mold them into critical thinkers, excellent writers, analytical readers, who can use those skills to find the patterns themselves, allowing them to effectively fight for themselves and their community, and to take the power back in society.